So for this video, we're going to look at cellular respiration. Video that I did prior dealt with photosynthesis. And photosynthesis is how plants make sugar. And why is this so important? Well, just like your car needs gasoline in order to run, our cells need a special type of gasoline in order to run. And that special type of gasoline is called ATP, adenosine triphosphate. And that's what you're seeing here in the top left-hand corner. Just like we have to put gasoline into our car, and our car takes that gasoline and breaks it down in order to work, our bodies have to take something called ATP and break it down in order to work. All cells need this gasoline in order to work. However, we have to have sugar to make this molecule. So this is why photosynthesis is so important in science, because without photosynthesis, nature doesn't have sugar. And without sugar, nature cannot make this gasoline called ATP. And without ATP, the cells would not function and the cells would die. So photosynthesis, which was taking carbon dioxide, taking carbon dioxide, taking sunlight and taking water, and using that to make oxygen and sugar. Well, cellular respiration is the opposite of that. Photosynthesis took water, carbon dioxide, and energy to make sugar. Well, cellular respiration is going to take that sugar and break it down. So cellular respiration is the breaking down of food in order to release energy. And what we're making is ATP. Now keep in mind, only autotrophs will do photosynthesis. Things like plants, algae, some bacteria. Every living cell, has to do respiration. Okay? Photosynthesis makes the sugar. Respiration takes the sugar and uses it to make ATP. So only autotrophs will do photosynthesis, but autotrophs and heterotrophs, every cell needs to do cellular respiration. So comparing the processes, like we mentioned, photosynthesis stores energy in food. It is going to take energy, water, and carbon dioxide and use it to make sugar. So this formula here is the formula for photosynthesis. Well, if you just turn it around, you have the formula for respiration. Okay. With respiration, we're going to take that sugar, we're going to take oxygen, and we're going to break it down. And when we break it down, we're going to form carbon dioxide. This is why, as humans, we breathe out carbon dioxide. We're going to make water, and we're going to make energy. However, photosynthesis uses sunlight as the energy. In this case, we're going to end up making what's called ATP, these molecules of gasoline that our cells need in order to run. So here is the formula for respiration. And since we're humans, I'm going to use humans as our example. You know that we breathe in oxygen. Well, there it is, 6O2. And we have to eat sugar, C6H12O6. And we use that to make carbon dioxide, which is a waste product. We breathe it out, and water and energy. Well, in us, the energy that we're going to make is that chemical called ATP. Now, cellular respiration, when people think of respiration, they think of breathing. Well, cellular respiration is a little bit different. Cellular respiration is where we take sugar and use it to break it down to form this gasoline. Now, again, if you just switch the arrow, so you're making sugar, remember that is going to be photosynthesis. So notice if you know one formula, you know both of them. Just watch which way your arrow is pointing. If the arrow is pointing away from sugar, that sugar is being broken down. That's respiration. If the arrow is pointing to sugar, we're making that sugar. That's photosynthesis. Well, in the case of cell processes, you'll see what's called aerobic respiration, and you'll see what's called anaerobic respiration. Aerobic respiration is what most creatures on Earth do, because aerobic respiration needs oxygen, and oxygen is available to almost every creature on Earth. However, some creatures are still ancient creatures, meaning they have not evolved that much, or they might live in very, very, very primitive conditions. So they do what's called anaerobic respiration. You'll see that this is also called fermentation. Anaerobic respiration, they don't use oxygen in order to do this process. Now, just like photosynthesis had two parts, it had the light-dependent reactions and it had the light-independent reactions. You're going to see that cellular respiration, which is aerobic respiration, which is what 99% of creatures on Earth do. It will also have two parts. So this video is going to focus on cellular respiration. Cellular respiration is aerobic respiration. And again, this is what most of the creatures on Earth do. The reason for this is that cellular respiration, in the end, will give us 36 to 38 molecules of ATP. I always use the analogy, it would be like me giving you a Hershey's candy bar. You know, Hershey's candy bar is divided up into like 8 different sections. Well, if you had to trade your Hershey's candy bar for gallons of gas, that's kind of what's happening in cellular respiration. If you only had one Hershey's candy bar, cellular respiration would allow you to trade 36 to 38 gallons of gas, which would be awesome, okay, for those of you who drive a car. Fermentation doesn't work as well. Fermentation, which is what a lot of creatures don't use, or your body will only use it in an emergency. For fermentation, for every 1 piece of sugar, you only get 4 molecules of ATP. So cellular respiration is more efficient in nature because for every 1 piece of sugar, you're going to get 36 to 38 pieces of ATP. Again, that's just like me handing you 1 candy bar, and you can take that 1 candy bar to a gas station and trade it for 36 to 38 gallons of gas. In the case of cellular respiration, this does occur in the mitochondria. If you remember when we talked about the parts of the cell, the mitochondria is what I called the gas station. So, in the case of cellular respiration, you do have 3 steps. You have what's called glycolysis, the Krebs cycle, and the electron transport chain. And I'm going to take you through each of these. Now, I am a picture person. I like to have pictures showing me what's going on. So I'm going to form a very simple bracket or line diagram that might help you. So you've eaten, and right now sugar has gone to your cells. And your cells need to take that sugar and use it to create this gasoline called ATP. So the very first thing that's going to happen is glycolysis. Glycolysis will always happen first. And glyco, as you know, means sugar. Lysis means to split. So in glycolysis, we are going to split that sugar. That's what the name means. Glycolysis means split that sugar. Sorry, my phone rang, so it interrupted me. But glycolysis is going to come first. And so with glycolysis, glycolysis happens in the cytoplasm of the cell. And its job is to take that sugar and start to divide it down. Well, I'm going to get into a little bit more detail. It's just really hard for me to write on my screen. But after glycolysis, we can split into 2 parts, depending on whether or not oxygen is available. If we have oxygen, we're going to continue, or we're going to do aerobic respiration. If there's no oxygen, we're going to do anaerobic. And again, I know my handwriting is really bad on this. We're going to do anaerobic respiration. But no matter what, glycolysis always happens first. And glycolysis is the breaking down of sugar. So with glycolysis, as you can see here, glycolysis, glyco meaning sugar, lysis means to split. Glycolysis is going to take that sugar and split it into pieces. Now, here we're going to create something called pyruvate. Pyruvate is also called pyruvic acid, and I like to use the term pyruvic acid better than pyruvate, because pyruvic acid lets you know, oh my gosh, I made an acid. And you know, we don't want acids in our cells because that will kill our cells. So cells that go through aerobic respiration or anaerobic respiration, no matter what, glycolysis happens first. And glycolysis means to split sugar. That's what the name means. Lysis means to split, gly means sugar. So we're going to take that glucose and we're going to start to break it down. Well, when we break it down, we create pyruvate, which is also called pyruvic acid. and we make 2 molecules of ATP. Remember, the main idea for this is to end up with 36 to 38 molecules of ATP. Well, right here, we've already made 2 of them. The problem is I created an acid, and I can't let that acid sit around in my cells. So I need to take that acid and break it down into something that's not toxic to my cells. So if oxygen is available, our cells will ship that pyruvic acid to our mitochondria. And our mitochondria is going to take that pyruvic acid and help us break it down. So it starts with glycolysis, and I'm going to end up with pyruvic acid, ATP, and this is going to occur in the cytoplasm. Now, the next steps will occur only in cellular respiration, which is aerobic respiration. So if oxygen is present, we're going to go to the next steps. If oxygen is not present, we'll go to something called anaerobic respiration or fermentation, which is going to be a different video. So, as animals, we breathe in oxygen. So as animals, we have the glucose. We break it down into pyruvate, ATP, and we're going to get a few hydrogen ions, okay, which are going to be important. Okay. The pyruvate and the hydrogen ions will move into the mitochondria for the next 2 steps. Step 2 occurs in the mitochondria. It's what we call the Krebs cycle. It's also called the citric acid cycle because pyruvate or pyruvic acid is a citric acid. So glycolysis took sugar and started to break it down. Well, it broke it down into pyruvate or pyruvic acid. So it's an acid, we need to get rid of it. So our body will send it to the mitochondria, and the mitochondria will start to take it apart. Well, in the process, we will get carbon dioxide. This is where the carbon dioxide comes from that we breathe out. We'll also make 2 more molecules of ATP, and we'll make a bunch of hydrogen. Hydrogen ions, H+. Well, hydrogen ions, since they're ions, they don't move around very easily, so we need a basket to come scoop them up. So we have a chemical called NAD. Think of NAD as a basket. It's called a hydrogen carrier. That NAD will scoop up the hydrogen and take it to the next step. The reason for that, when hydrogen ions build up, that's what an acid is. Okay. If you have a liquid with high amounts of hydrogen ions, you've got an acid. Well, I can't just let these hydrogen ions build up inside my mitochondria because they become acidic, and that will destroy my mitochondria. So glycolysis takes glucose and breaks it down into 2 molecules of ATP and pyruvate. We send that pyruvate to our mitochondria to run through the Krebs cycle, which is also called the citric acid cycle. That pyruvate gets broken down. In the process, we will make carbon dioxide. And as animals, we breathe it out. Plants tend to store the carbon dioxide to reuse it for photosynthesis. But carbon dioxide gets made. We'll then make 2 more molecules of ATP. So now we have 4 molecules total, 2 from glycolysis and 2 from the Krebs cycle. But we'll also make a bunch of hydrogen. So we'll have this little chemical called NAD, which is a basket. It will come and scoop up the hydrogen, and the hydrogen goes to the next step. So the next step is what's called the electron transport chain, or the ETC. And I always think of the electron transport chain as a series of steps, because it's actually a series of proteins that these electrons go down. So I consider the electron transport chain to be a series of steps. Now, we made a bunch of hydrogen in the Krebs cycle, and this basket called NAD will carry the hydrogen to the steps. But then it dumps the hydrogen down the steps. So the hydrogen jumps from step to step. And each time it jumps from step to step, it makes ATP. So in the electron transport chain, we're going to start with a hydrogen. We're going to start with hydrogen at the top of the stairs, and we're going to throw the hydrogen down the stairs. Well, every time it bounces, ow, 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 it creates energy. And that energy is ATP. So by the time we've thrown all of the hydrogen away, we're actually going to end up with between 34, 32, and 34 molecules of ATP in the electron transport chain by itself. The problem is, though, if you have stairs and you just throw a bunch of toys down to the bottom of the stairs, they all get stuck at the bottom of the stairs. Remember I mentioned hydrogen concentrations build up, you make an acid. So once we toss the hydrogen from the proteins like hot potatoes, or the hydrogen falls down the stairs, we can't leave the hydrogen sitting there, or it becomes an acid, and that will destroy the mitochondria. So down at the bottom, waiting for its little friend, right down here, waiting, is going to be oxygen. Oxygen is standing at the bottom of the stairs. Oxygen has two hands. So oxygen can grab two hydrogens. So this is how we make water at the end of the process. So in the case of glycolysis, we start with sugar. And glycolysis takes that sugar and breaks it down. And when it breaks it down, it's going to make 2 molecules of ATP, and it's going to make pyruvate. That pyruvate is an acid, so we need to take that pyruvate and send it to the mitochondria. Well, it's an acid, we need to break it down. So inside of the mitochondria, we are going to do what's called the Krebs cycle. The Krebs cycle will take the pyruvate, make 2 more molecules of ATP, carbon dioxide, and a bunch of hydrogen. Well, the carbon dioxide leaves the cell. As humans, we breathe it out. As plants, they recycle it and use it for photosynthesis. But all these hydrogens are left behind, and hydrogen concentration buildup creates an acid. So we have to get rid of that hydrogen. It's a waste product. So we send that hydrogen to the electron transport chain. And the electron transport chain, as we're sending the hydrogen, it's kind of like we're throwing stuff down the stairs. Well, as it's getting thrown down the stairs, it's creating ATP. And we will get between 32 to 34 molecules of ATP. So in the end, we have between 36 to 38 molecules of ATP. And waiting at the end of the stairs to catch the hydrogen as it falls is oxygen. So we are going to end up with water in our process as well. So the whole process produces between 36 to 38 molecules of ATP. We get 2 molecules of ATP from glycolysis, which occurs in the cytoplasm. We get 2 molecules of ATP from the Krebs cycle, which occurs in the mitochondria. And we get 36 to 38 molecules of ATP from the electron transport chain, which also happens in the mitochondria. So while photosynthesis stores the sun's energy in a usable form, which is glucose, cellular respiration, which is also called aerobic respiration, will release that energy. It will break down that sugar and store it as ATP, which is the gasolines that our cells can use for later.